Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers every weekday here on Al Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's programme, as the war of words between Elon Musk and political figures in the UK escalates, the billionaire's father, Errol Musk, speaks to Al Arabiya News about what this means for the United Kingdom. The US prepares for a month of high-profile events, notably the inauguration of the US President-elect Donald Trump. This as Washington maintains high alert on the 4th anniversary of the US Capitol riot. And Israel and Hamas are wrangling over the details of a potential deal to halt Israel's war on the Gaza Strip and bring the hostages home. Hello and Happy New Year to our viewers for our first edition of the new year. Now, straight to our top story. We begin with the war of words between Elon Musk and a number of political figures in the UK and beyond. What began as a series of swipes by Musk at the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has now snowballed into a full-scale row with Musk, claiming that the Prime Minister is now, quote, complicit in the rape of Britain. This while he was leading the Crown prosecution. Well, hitting back, Starmer has defended his position and called the allegations lies and misinformation.
Because those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson, not interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson promote. And those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, not protecting victims. Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse throughout her entire career.
The British Prime Minister speaking there. Well, one of the other people in the firing line in recent days has been the leader of the UK Reform Party, Nigel Farage, a friend of Donald Trump's, whom Elon Musk now says does not have what it takes to lead his party. This after Farage refused to throw his support behind Tommy Robinson, who remains behind bars. Well, for more on this, we're joined now by Elon Musk's father, Errol Musk. Thank you very much indeed for being with us here on Al Arabiya News once again. You have spoken to the British media yourself, and you've said that you don't view Nigel Farage as being, quote, a strong man. It rather sounds like you and your son are aligned on this issue.
Yes, no, I would say we are, yes, absolutely. It's not a complicated problem. It's rather simple, actually. It's it's obvious what's going on, and so there's, like minds think, alike,
Yeah, I mean, you've said Nigel Farage does not have what it takes and that the Reform UK party needs a new leader. I mean, that's pretty scathing. And I'm just wondering why this is being said about Nigel Farage.
Well, last week on another channel, English channel, I said that in my opinion, Farage is not strong. He's not a strong man. He talks sense and so forth, and I can imagine him in a ministerial position quite easily, and even as a wingman. But as the lead man, I feel he doesn't have the strength. It doesn't come across to me that he has the strength. I said on television last week, and then this was followed up. I haven't spoken to Elon lately. And this was followed up by Elon saying that he thinks Farage is no good. And I mean, Elon was basically thinking of the poor showing that Farage has made with the grooming gangs for rape, and then of course the fact that Tommy Robinson is in solitary confinement for 18 months for doing more or less nothing. And so that's what Elon is referring to. And so, yes, I completely agree with that, I agree with Elon completely.
Yeah, you've raised lots of issues there, and we'll come back to some of them. Just specifically about Nigel Farage, is there something about him, his personality, is there something about him that worries you?
No, he talks sense, and he's been at it for a long time. But, it's like, how do you tell when somebody is a, great movie star? How do you tell? It's very difficult to explain what it is. It's charisma, it's X factor, and so forth, And then, the other thing is, if you're going to get England out of the hole it's dug itself into, a contracting economy, just everything going wrong everywhere, and they try and tax themselves out of it, it's laughable, then you realize you need somebody who's literally prepared to be crucified to be a leader. You don't want somebody who's basically prepared to just get up and between one cigarette and another and make a few, sort of comments about we'll have an inquiry. No. The situation is way beyond just doing little inquiries and things. The situation there is out of control. And this Starmer guy is going. He's going to go. I said 3 months ago, he won't make February. And I can tell you now, he won't make February. He won't make the end of February.
OK, so what you're saying is that, first of all, Nigel Farage does not have what it takes, in your opinion. He's lacking the star power, as you put it, that an actor perhaps might or might not have. And you're also saying that the British Prime Minister isn't going to last another month. Can you just clarify that for us?
Well, the feeling one gets, I've been in the political wars for years. And, you get the feeling this is not going to last. You start seeing what happens on the ground, and you realize, wait a minute, this is not going to last. And so, perhaps 3 months ago during those riots, I said this government's not going to last. And my thoughts focus on February. I see the people in England are saying by the end of the year, but I can't see that going. I can't see it going that long, And it's not, it's not that Nigel Farage is a bad person or anything like that. Obviously, I'm sure he's a very nice, personable person and so forth. But it's about whether you have the, do you have the Spartacus factor? Do you have the Napoleon factor? Do you have it or don't you have it? It's not about, whether you're a nice person or not,
Going back to Nigel Farage specifically, and then we'll come back to Keir Starmer. I mean, Nigel Farage is the leader of a successful third, fourth party in the United Kingdom that appeared from nowhere not so very long ago. They managed to score about 14% of the votes during the election in July. They won, I think, 5 seats as well. I mean, they're not doing too badly, are they, for a party that's pretty new on the scene?
No, not at all. Quite frankly, they've done quite well. And, from our point of view, the Tories are just the Whigs with a different coloured jacket on. So, no, reform is good. And Elon will still provide funds for them, either by lending the money or giving the money, whatever is allowed. But no, reform is very good. I've got nothing against them, and I've got nothing against Nigel Farage. I'm just saying that in order to move forward, you can't have, decisions over a cup of tea. You can't make, this is serious what's going on there. You've got a man who put his life on the line, and that's Tommy Robinson, who very likely, if you look at the history in the world for the last 2,000 years and beyond, and before that even, Tommy Robinson is very likely going to be the Prime Minister of England in due course, or the UK, I mean. So it's difficult to understand now. But, if you take our country, for example, in 1963, Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment after his death sentence was commuted. And if you'd said in those days, he's going to be the president of South Africa one day, people would have absolutely thought you were off your head. It was stupidity. No. It's if you go back, it's so many of the people, that have been in prison. Nehru was in prison. In India, you could just go on and on. There's so many examples. And, so Tommy Robinson is the person to look to, who has shown manliness, who has shown that he's got the X factor, he's got something. Nigel is a very nice person, and talking nicely to these Labour types, they're going to run rings around him.
Okay, I don't think our viewers will have ever heard Tommy Robinson's name mentioned in the same sentences as Nelson Mandela. But I just want to ask why the interest in UK politics, and why would your son Elon want to support the Reform Party at all?
Well, let me just get back to Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela placed various bombs which actually caused a power line to topple and killed many people, many, you could say, innocent people. He had several other crimes. So when you start saying, how can you possibly compare Mandela to Tommy Robinson? You must realize that in those days, Nelson Mandela was an absolute scoundrel as far as the country was concerned. He was not a great person. They wanted to hang him. So let's get real here. And so when we come back to Tommy Robinson, it requires a little bit of a broader frame of mind to understand what I'm saying. My professor of history would agree with me. And so it's what you have to look at in history, what happens in history. When you take your political opponents and lock them up on spurious charges, then you start to look at who it is they're locking up. And so, all right. So coming to your next question, look, we are all English-speaking people. We are all part of what was originally the Commonwealth. Even England, even the United States, I beg your pardon, was a country set up originally, the colonies, by England. England went around the world bringing civilization. They brought education. They brought roads. They brought hospitals. They brought everything that was needed, administration, to all the world. And we all benefited from it. And in fact, America wouldn't be what it is today if the colonies hadn't benefited from it as well. And so we are all English, and we look at England as a sort of parent country. And we all, in the past, over the last 50 years, certainly of my 50 years of time in business and work and so on, we always thought of England as, they're the people who know how it's done. They're the people who have all the answers. They are the people who set the example. And as I said on another channel, when I was a young boy working in an engineering office, we would always be aware when the man from England came through to the office from London and so forth. And we always would want to just have a look at him and peek at him and see if we could see him in the office, because he always wore a pinstripe suit and he had a flower in his lapel. And so that's how the people in the outside world, including Elon, see England. We see it as our parent country. And when we see our parent country, floundering and doing things that we can't believe, we have to get involved. We have to get back in the boats and go back, if you want it like that,
Can I just pick up on that? Because, you said last week in this interview, you said someone needs to get England out of this. A strong man needs to get England out of this, you said. When you say this, what are you referring to? What does England need to get out of?
England's economy is contracting. So if it contracts at this rate over the next few years, it goes very quickly, it compounds. And so in a few years' time, short years' time, the economy might be 10 to 15% smaller than it is. And then it won't be able to sustain the population. And this is very serious. And, in times gone by, everything we bought came from England. In this country and other countries I've stayed in, Canada and so on, virtually everything we bought came, or not everything, but nearly everything, certainly in South Africa, came from England. And these days, absolutely nothing comes from England. So it is very serious. And not only that, the things that they've been doing, putting people in prison and taking out prisoners to place people who said something on Facebook in prison. I believe there are 3,000 people, I'm told by Elon, that are in prison in England for posting or saying things that were not agreeable to this Starmer government. That's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And that's not England. It's not England, And so England is a place where we learn decency, where we learned about giving people another chance, giving people an opportunity to improve themselves. That's where it all came from. During the war, the Second World War, England was just wonderful. It's like the most wonderful country that stood out, and produced extraordinary people. It's not really rocket science, what I'm saying. It's common sense.
When it comes to Nigel Farage, who is, of course, a close friend of Donald Trump's, they've had a friendship that goes back quite a long time. I mean, do you get the impression that Elon is consulting the Trump script here, or is he going it alone when he attacks
I wouldn't be able to say.
Nigel Farage?
I would imagine, as Trump is a very streetwise man, he did all his business in New York. I mean, if you're not streetwise there, you've had it. No. I would imagine they've all realized that by now, with the things going on in the UK, that Farage has not been able to do anything about it and has really not, put himself in the firing line. And I imagine that worries them because, as you know, last year, Trump, in spite of all the things that were done to him, lawfare and all the incredibly wicked and basically criminal things that were done to Trump, he kept on until he was shot, if you understand what I mean. And so we're not seeing that with Farage. We're seeing that he's chatty with these Starmer crowd, and that's not going to help. That's not going to help. These people have to be thrown out on their backsides. If they don't get out, they have to be thrown out.
Yeah, your son is saying at the moment that America should liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government. I mean, I don't think the people of England have ever heard anything like that before. I mean, is there really such a great sense of...
You used those words. I didn't say that.
No, that's what your son, Elon Musk, has just put out in a tweet. America should liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government. Those are his words. I mean...
Oh, his words. Yeah, well, it's not my words. But fair enough, that's Elon's words.
What's he getting at?
So Elon is my son, and I suppose in that respect, I shouldn't say, but he's the smartest guy I've ever met. I've known, my own son. So the thing is, I've learned from long experience to listen to what Elon says, because even as a child, he was worth listening to. And so, yes, I think Elon is probably right if he said that. And, we have a situation where at the present time, it's almost impossible for the Trump administration to deal with this government in England. The ministers of this government in Starmer and so forth, and the ministers have said such extraordinary rude things about Trump, way beyond, sort of slander. I mean, it's way beyond slander. And it's disgusting. And how on earth do you now meet with these people and actually attempt to have deals and make...
Yeah, but Nigel Farage isn't one of the people who's made rude comments about Donald Trump. Quite the opposite. He's been extremely supportive of him.
No. Let me say, Nigel is held in high regard. It's not about him personally. It's not about Nigel Farage personally. He's obviously a very nice person, and he's obviously stuck it out. I've watched him on the European Union floor when he's got up and said things which took quite a lot of guts to say. And so, no, Farage is definitely minister material. I mean, for a new government, he's very much the kind of wingman you want. But what we're saying is that he isn't the man that is needed at this point. He isn't strong enough. But at the same time, we've said he's now been given a bit of a warning shot across his bows by us, and therefore, let's see what he can do. Let's do the English thing and give him another chance. Let's see what he comes up with. We'll give him another chance for sure. We might even give him a third chance, but he has to come up with something stronger. These people that he's up against are playing hardball. They're not playing around. Starmer is playing hardball. And maybe people can't see it, but the things he's doing are tearing that society apart. So, if people can't see it, I'm sorry for them. I'm very sorry for them. The average British person can barely get by with the amount of tax that they have to pay. With every British pound, about 60 pence of it is going in taxes. Every pound they earn, it's no good. You can't live like that anymore.
Just interested to know how you think Farage has handled all of this, because he's obviously probably quite embarrassed to be told and to hear in a public forum that he's not up to the job. He's responded by saying, he doesn't agree with everything your son says, but he does think your son is his hero. So pretty complimentary nevertheless. Do you think the relationship is reparable, or do you think it's beyond repair?
Oh, no, there's nothing beyond repair. As I said, we can give him a second chance. You must realize, of course, that Elon's tweet is the result of quite a bit of discussion. It didn't just come out of the blue. He's been told a few times that, what are you going to do? It's not as though he's suddenly been, surprised by this. This is the culmination of, a few weeks of talking, about it. And, he's not coming up with the goods. And he's going back to the basis that England is civilized, and he must try and behave in a civilized manner. Sorry, I beg your pardon, somebody coming in there. You have to behave in a civilized manner, and Farage is doing that. But in the circumstances, I'm not saying you mustn't be in a civilized manner, but I'm saying you have to be a little more, show a little more strength. There has to be. Otherwise, Starmer's just going to go on and tear this country to pieces.
Well, he's only had 6 months or so to do the job as Prime Minister. He only came to power in July. And some might say your son has got this remit, which is to cut the federal budget in the United States and act as a special advisor for Donald Trump when he takes office in precisely 2 weeks from now.
Yes.
Some might say he's getting a little bit ahead of himself, dealing in issues that are not yet on his remit, and 2 weeks ahead of the Trump administration taking office. What do you say to that?
Well, Elon is still a private person. So at this point in time, he's able to do this kind of thing. If he joins the cabinet in 2 weeks' time, which I'm sure he won't then be a private person. He'll be speaking on behalf of the administration. So he would have to get, the approval of the president. And I imagine he will get that. They are talking about this all the time. It's not as though he's all by himself and, deciding these things. No. Thinking people are busy thinking about all this. And, the Trump win was a wake-up call for the European countries to see that they must make a change in what's happening. They are not going to be prisoners of the WEF and so forth in future. And you're seeing this in Europe, not only in England. People are realizing, wait a minute, we're having our countries taken away from us. We're having all our rights taken away from us. We're less important in our own countries than people that come from third world countries. And this is no good, And so Elon and Trump and so forth obviously discuss it all the time. It's not as though they don't discuss it, obviously. And, it's been put to Farage a few times. What are you going to do? And so what he's done hasn't really brought out much to show that he's worth being there. And for that reason, this tweet was made. And in fact, before the tweet was made, last week, I said on Talk TV, I think it was, that, Farage is not strong enough to be the leader. And I was preempted them. I was ahead of them, of Elon in that regard.
We've talked in the past, Mr. Musk, about your relationship with your son. And I just want to ask you, I mean, in the past you have said you're concerned sometimes about your son. A couple of years ago you said you were worried even about his eating habits. Do you still worry about him?
Sure, of course I'm worried about my son. I'm worried about all my children. You know, listen to any parent. You know, obviously. No, I've got no worry about Elon in terms of his thinking and what he's doing. No, he's really doing very well. And the proposed DOGE committee is desperately needed in America, where you've had numerous government departments where the people don't even come to work, haven't even come to work in the space of a year, haven't even used their offices, which have lights on and air conditioning on and all that sort of thing, and haven't even been in their offices inside a year and picking up government checks. No, the waste is unbelievable there. And the can-do people have started to realize that and get rid of these so-called can't-do people. Elon's job ahead of him, thank heavens he has somebody to help him, is very, very important. And it will be done.
All right, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Errol Musk, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get more analysis now on Elon Musk's change of mind and the latest in the British political scene. We can speak to Professor Alan Sked, the founder and former leader of UKIP. That's a party that Nigel Farage also once led. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Sked. Let's start by talking about Nigel Farage. One of the things that you've tweeted in the last day or so, you said, quote, "It took one meeting for Musk to see straight through Farage." I just want to know, what do you think he saw that he didn't like?
Well, I think Farage is an opportunist and a chancer. He has no great intellectual capacity whatsoever. He just rants and makes a lot of noise, but he's got no intellectual capacity to analyze policies or situations. And he's intellectually very lightweight, and I think he's politically very lightweight, although he has actually a record of achievements of winning elections with minor parties. Whether Musk, who must have huge intellectual resources as well as financial resources, just met him and decided this man was too lightweight to be a partner, I don't know, but I suspect that's what happened.
I mean, it's widely reported that you yourself no longer have a particularly cordial relationship with Mr. Farage. I just wondered, is that true? And what's your issue with him?
No, it's true. I haven't spoken to him since 1997 when I retired as party leader. But in the 1997 general election, just before the election was due to take place, Nigel asked me whether candidates for the National Front, former National Front candidates, i.e. extreme right-wing fascists, really racist, could stand as UKIP candidates. And I said, no, of course not. And I got a kind of racist reply from him. So I always thereafter saw him as some kind of fascist and racist. And when he made contact with somebody else, who was the research director of the BNP, the British National Party, another a fascist breakaway party from the National Front. I exposed this, and he wasn't very happy about that. So I pursued him as someone who was supposedly involved in a party to take us out of Europe, but who spoke almost non-stop about immigration and Muslims. I just sort of said this wasn't what the UK was originally set up about, and we clashed over that. And he eventually became leader, and he went to the European Parliament, which I would never have done, and boasted that he made millions out of taking expenses there without actually doing anything.
OK, well, he obviously isn't on this programme to defend himself, but you've got to hand it to him that he performed pretty well. His party, Reform UK, did pretty well in the July election. They got about 14% of the vote. I mean, he's got some charisma, hasn't he?
Well, it depends what you mean by charisma. He's a sort of a populist figure who can rant and make hay with all sorts of difficulties in government. And I don't deny that he has achievements in getting the party where it is. On the other hand, there was really a reaction to 14 years of failed Conservative government. And it's quite clear that the electorate at the last election was determined to vote anywhere for anybody really except for the Conservatives, and they had their worst election result in history. This the oldest democratic party in European politics, and this was the worst result it had ever had. And the Labour Party on 34% of the vote got this huge 200-plus majority, and the Liberal Democrats went up from a handful to about 70 MPs. Everybody was determined that the Tories had to go, and Farage was a beneficiary as well.
I mean, knowing him as you did, admittedly, a very long time ago, how do you think comments like those made by Elon Musk are likely to have sat with Nigel Farage? Comments like, Nigel Farage does not have what it takes, Reform UK needs a new leader. I mean, pretty scathing. How do you think that will have sat with Nigel Farage?
Oh, he'll brush it off like water off a duck's back. I mean, I doubt very much whether Elon Musk will be able to get rid of Farage. Farage absolutely controls the Reform Party. It's set up to be the instrument of him as leader. All the parties he's led, he's changed so that he absolutely dominates them. And it's a party of very angry, low-middle-class people who are in a state of anxiety about not only Britain, with regards to the economy, with regards to immigration, the health service, but also they know the international situation is very precarious. And in this state of anxiety, they're rushing towards some kind of solution by some sort of saviour. And Farage is presenting himself as the saviour, and he's made himself into the absolute leader of this party. And as I say, it's a bit like Mussolini and the fascist party. I mean, il duce è sempre ragione, the fascists used to say, the leader is always right. And that's more or less how his followers see him inside Reform. So I don't really see that Elon Musk is going to be able to topple him.
Elon Musk has been, I'm going to say the falling out between Musk and Farage, or if it is a falling out, if we can call it that. The spat, perhaps, is probably a better way to describe it.
Well, I think they've only met once. I don't think they know each other very well.
No, I think they've only met once.
Once seems to have been enough for Musk.
But this all stems back from the fact that Musk wants Tommy Robinson, who is a well-known figure in the UK, to be freed from prison. I'd just like to ask for your thoughts, Professor. Why do you think this issue of Tommy Robinson's liberty is an issue so close to Elon Musk's heart?
Well, Elon Musk has taken up the issue of the rape gangs, the Pakistani rape gangs in Britain, which he's obsessed about, and he thinks the Labour Party, in order to retain Muslim votes, is being soft on these gangs and not pursuing them or charging them. And that although the council in Oldham has asked Jess Phillips, the Home Secretary, for a public inquiry, a national public inquiry, she has refused. And according to Musk, this is because she's in a marginal seat. She's beholden to Muslim voters to retain her political career. And the Labour Party, and she in particular, is putting political advantage or sustainability before justice, before charging a large number of Pakistanis with gang rape of white girls of the ages of 9 to 14. He also believes that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, I think between 2008 and 2013, didn't do enough to pursue these gangs again, because as a Labour figure, he didn't want to create racial tensions in seats in which the Labour Party was vulnerable. So he believes that the Labour hierarchy, particularly Phillips and Starmer, are putting the interests of Labour in front of those of justice. They're not pursuing, and therefore they're not pursuing these rape gangs or having a public inquiry, because it would all end up looking very bad for Labour. So in this, he's found a figure of Tommy Robinson, who for years now has led a popular working class movement against these gangs and against the influence in northern cities, and has been out in the streets and held rallies and specifically made the pursuit of these rape gangs an issue concerned with his own followers. And when all this was going on, and Robinson was jailed 2 or 3 times for disturbing the peace, Farage said nothing. And Farage, as leader of Reform, or before that of UKIP, wasn't actually active in bringing up the issue of these rape gangs, whereas Robinson was. And now Farage is saying that Robinson's beyond the pale and he doesn't want him in Reform, maybe because he'd be a more popular figure than Farage, because Robinson's a real street fighter, whereas Farage really likes television performances. And he's got practically his own television station in GB News behind him. And so Elon Musk, looking into all of this, has perhaps discovered that Robinson was a much more virile opponent of the gangs than Farage ever was, and therefore he believes that Robinson should take a bigger role, perhaps come into Reform, but Farage won't have that.
Yeah, and Professor, just before we crossed to you, we spoke to Elon Musk's father, Errol Musk, who seems to be pretty aligned with his son on quite a lot of issues, and we've spoken to him a few times on this channel now. One of the things he said is he likened Tommy Robinson to Nelson Mandela. Just wondered what you thought of that. The other thing he said is he thought that Tommy Robinson would be Prime Minister of the UK, and quite soon, he suggested. For the benefit of our audience, our international audience, who might not know all of these characters, are we talking here, in the case of Tommy Robinson or Nigel Farage, in your opinion, about 2 potential future Prime Ministers?
No, I don't think either of them will be Prime Minister. I certainly hope not. I mean, Robinson is a street fighter on various issues, and he has the respect of a huge number of the working class because he's called out these Pakistani rape gangs in a way that no one else has. But he doesn't. He's like Farage. He doesn't have the intellectual capability to actually go beyond certain issues, however popular they may be. I mean, the idea of Farage being able to run an economy or a health service or conduct foreign policy is ridiculous. He simply doesn't have the brains for it. And the same is true, I fear, of Tommy Robinson. He has courage in spades, but the intellectual capacity to run a government, I fear, I don't think he has. In any case, the British public is very, very wary of Robinson and would never elect him, and would never put him in a position of being Prime Minister. And likewise, Farage is loathed by 50% of the British public. He may have some kind of following which will get him a certain number of seats, but I don't think he'll ever he'll ever get to the position or situation where he's eligible to be a Prime Minister. Again, Farage's party, the Reform Party, as far as I know, is in favour of proportional representation. They want to do away with the first-past-the-post voting system, which we have in Britain, which also is the system of voting in America. The one who gets the most votes wins. He wants Farage, because this system would never allow him to get into Parliament until the last election. He went in favour of PR, the European system, whereby seats are distributed in Parliament according to the proportional vote you get. Now, if that were implemented, you would get the end of British history, because you would end up with all sorts of loony Greens, Lib Dems, all sorts of minorities suddenly able to get into Parliament because of a proportional system rather than a first-past-the-post system. And I don't think anything would happen except chaos. When that's pointed out to the electorate, I don't think that will help Farage either. But I really don't believe that whatever the opinion polls say just now, when it comes to the election, Farage has the pulling power to get him anywhere near power. I mean, he's got 5 MPs just now. Supposing the latest opinion polls would say how wonderful he is, gives him something like 70 out of 650 MPs at the next election. That doesn't put him anywhere near 10 Downing Street.
OK, so for the record, neither Tommy Robinson nor Nigel Farage, in your opinion, likely to be the next Prime Minister of the UK. Thank you very much for your time. We're going to have to leave it there. Professor Alan Sked, thank you very much indeed.
OK, thank you.
Now, it's been exactly 4 years since the storming of the US Capitol. Well, more than 1,500 people who are accused of taking part in the attack on that government building still don't know their fate. Will they be prosecuted or pardoned? Well, US President-elect Donald Trump has promised to pardon individuals prosecuted over the assault once he is back in power, including 600 of them who have faced felony charges. Well, this comes as Congress is set to meet today to count the Electoral College votes and certify Trump's win in the 2024 election. Well, for more on this, we can speak now to Scott Lucas, Professor of US and International Politics at the Clinton Institute at the University College Dublin. Thank you very much indeed for joining us once again, Professor. The storming of the Capitol, I mean, a major event in US modern history, happened on this day 4 years ago, as Congress was meeting to do exactly what they're going to be doing later, which is to certify the November election results. I just want to ask for your thoughts. This comeback by Donald Trump. I mean, none of us would have imagined this would be happening 4 years ago, would we?
Well, Tom, I don't call it a comeback by Donald Trump because he never went away. And the challenge he presents, first and foremost, to the U.S. system, never went away. I mean, I think it's a useful reminder that 4 years ago on this day, I was working for Turkish television, and I was doing live coverage of what should have been the smooth certification of Joe Biden as the 46th U.S. president. But instead, as I was giving commentary, I was watching live shots of hundreds of people crossing barricades, pushing aside Capitol Police, and raiding the U.S. Capitol, the Capitol attack. And that was a Capitol attack, which was, yes, instigated by Donald Trump and by his supporters as they tried to overturn the 2020 election. So far from the process we're going to get today, which will be a very smooth certification of Donald Trump as the 47th president, what you had were these supporters not only blocking the certification of Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, not only in effect trying to overturn the US process, they were threatening to execute legislators, threatening to execute even Trump's vice president, Mike Pence. So I think it's an important reminder and a juxtaposition that as maybe unexpected, unpredictable as Donald Trump's victory in 2024 was, that this is only the latest stage of a process in which he has effectively tried to overturn the US system to hold on to power. And that as he now takes power, being inaugurated on January 20th, he has, his words, not mine, pledged to act like a dictator on day one. And so I think rather than being a comeback, this is an ongoing question about whether the US is able to protect its system with an executive alongside Congress and the courts, or whether we have a wannabe autocrat and whether he'll be more successful this time around in trying to impose his rule than he was during his first term.
I just want to ask you about something that President Biden said in the Washington Post on Sunday. He wrote a piece in which he said that, quote, an unrelenting effort has been underway to rewrite, even erase the events of that day. He's talking about the 6th of January 2021. We cannot allow the truth to be lost. I just want to ask for your thoughts. Do you think there is an attempt, and I'm wondering if he's getting at the pardons here, but I'd like to get your thoughts, an attempt to airbrush what happened on that day from US history?
The attempt to airbrush January 6th, 2021 started on January 6th, 2021. That very same day, Donald Trump, having done nothing for hours, having allowed his supporters to rampage through the Capitol and issue their threats, when he finally was pushed by advisors to make a video statement, he called them patriots. He would later call this a day of love. That is an airbrushing. In fact, it's an inversion of what happened, where violence actually became some type of affection for country, where the threats to execute in some ways were expressions of admiration. Well, even if they were expressions of admiration for Trump, they were a very, very serious threat. And what happened is that during the investigations, and there was a full congressional investigation of what happened that day, during the legal investigations, culminating in the indictment of Donald Trump on felony charges for trying to overturn the 2020 election, using social media platforms like that run by Donald Trump's effectively unelected co-president now, Elon Musk, there was an attempt to put out misinformation and disinformation that this was not violent, that this was somehow an expression of a legal process, or even conspiracy theories that all of this was set up by the FBI to make Donald Trump look bad. And yes, even as we speak today on that 4th anniversary, that misinformation and disinformation goes on, and it will provide the foundation for Donald Trump to pardon at least some of the people, at least some of the more than 1,000 people who have been convicted of taking part in that attempt to overturn not only the US Capitol, but the US Constitution and the US system of democracy.
Yeah, it's going to be a really sad day, isn't it, for a lot of people? And it sounds like you're not exactly going to be celebrating this from what you've been telling me. There was a police officer, one of the several police officers who were injured on the 6th of January 2021. Aquilino Gonel said in the New York Times on Sunday, quote, I sometimes wonder why I risked my life to defend our elected officials from a mob inspired by Mr. Trump, only to see him return to power stronger than ever. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people thinking along those sorts of lines, aren't there, today?
I fully appreciate what that officer said. Indeed, more than 140 police officers injured in the line of duty during that attack on the Capitol. At least one perishing from a heart attack brought on by those events, and others who very, very close to being killed. And it is certainly great sadness that the U.S. could come to this. But then I think about the other side of this 4 years on, and that is despite all of Donald Trump's efforts to cling on to power in January 2021, he failed. Despite his attempts to get the military to support what is in effect a coup attempt, he failed. Despite his attempt to twist Congress and coerce Congress into not certifying Joe Biden's victory, he failed. And while he came back into, or will come back into the White House, he did so properly. He did so legally through an election in November 2024. So the US system is bent, but it has not yet been broken. And I think you have to remind ourselves of that in case there is this attempt now by Donald Trump to break it, that it is not inevitable that he will rule in effect like a wannabe king, that he will make Congress, the courts, the agencies, you and I bend it down to him, that there will be those who say, no, the American system is not for one man, it is for Americans. And so I think even as I have quite often been saddened by what happened in my native country in recent years, there are good people there, and good people who want to see America, both in its values and in its expression of those values, be more than simply a personal quest for power, trampling on the intentions of those who founded the country more than 250 years ago.
Just turning our attention to what exactly happens today. I mean, some people say this is just a constitutional formality, this process of election certification, but it's going to be quite an uncomfortable day, isn't it, for the Vice President, Kamala Harris, who under the Constitution has to kind of oversee and preside over all the proceedings. I mean, she obviously didn't win the election against Donald Trump in November. She lost it extremely convincingly. I mean, what do you think is going to be going through her mind?
I mean, there's been a lot of soul searching amongst not only Kamala Harris, but amongst Democrats as to why they did not hold on to the White House, given that they were running against, again, let us be honest, a convicted felon, a man who has been accused not only of effectively these crimes against America, but of sexual assault, of fraud, a man who will be sentenced on January 10th, although that sentence will be suspended on 34 felony counts. But I think Kamala Harris, for all that soul searching, has a duty to fulfill. She is the Vice President of the United States. It is her duty to oversee the certification of what will be the transfer of power 2 weeks from now. And I have no doubt she'll carry out those duties, however saddened she might be, however concerned she might be, to the best of her abilities, because given what happened 4 years ago, it is even more important to hold up the example. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, it is important to hold up the example of how the US system does function and should function, even if the man who is being certified today is a man who doesn't really want to observe the rules of that system.
Just lastly, Professor, I just want to sort of get your take on the temperature in the United States at the moment. I mean, it's been a very eventful start to 2025. Tragedy on New Year's Day in New Orleans, tragedy in Las Vegas as well. Flags flying at half-mast everywhere, including above Congress for the late President Jimmy Carter. I mean, what is the mood right now, would you say?
I think that'll vary from American to American. You're going to have some Americans who will celebrate Trump coming back into the White House. You'll have others who will be very concerned, as I am, about it. But I think there are two Americas right now. There is an America right now which is still blessed in that it's economically a very prosperous country. Indeed, is economically in much better shape than it was when Trump left office a few years ago, although you might not know it from the way the headlines are spun. An America which continues to be technologically advanced, an America to which many people have looked up to in terms of the values that it expresses, even if they're not be fulfilled. And an America which, and I'm glad you mentioned it, will be celebrating the life of one of his previous presidents, a man named Jimmy Carter, who I think embodied values like decency and tolerance and respect. And then there's the other America, the America that we quite often see through social media, or we quite often see not through responsible media, but through attack media, which is an America which is polarized, an America which is gripped by hatred, by fear, an America which, because of its proliferation of weapons, has episodes like we have seen in New Orleans and in Las Vegas just in the past few days. And I think it's important to remember that America is neither one nor the other. It is neither a utopia, which has become one of the leading powers on this planet, nor is it a country which is one of carnage and destruction, which is the way that Donald Trump has painted it, not just for weeks, but for years. And so to reach down, not in terms of the spectacle of Donald Trump, but the daily lives of Americans, that they want what everybody else wants: decent housing, decent education, decent economy, and a system that works. I think that's true for most Americans, even if those Americans are not always the loudest voices on social media that tend to pick up the coverage.
And just my last question to you. I mean, last time around, when this certification process happened on the 6th of January 2021, there was, of course, this claim that the election had been stolen. No such claims this time around. And you are expecting, I think, from what you were saying earlier, that things will go smoothly today.
I see absolutely no hitch on the certification process, because Again, it's the contrast between these two Americas I talk about. The America that you will see unroll today in a system which has been developed for almost 250 years, which has a constitution which was laid down from 1789 and holds to this day, an America which has a system of executive power, Congress, the courts, the rules of the game, as it were. Well, Democrats and many Republicans observe those rules. And by those rules, Donald Trump is your next president. The irony is that the other America that we've been discussing is that the man who will be put into office is the man who doesn't believe the rules should apply to him. And whether he's able to bend American agencies to his will, whether he's able to bend the courts to his will, whether he's able to make Congress bow down to him, in effect, whether he's able to break those rules, will have serious import, not only for the United States, but for the rest of us, whether where I am in Ireland, whether where you are in the Gulf, in terms of what the next 4 years will be for our lives.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on Al Arabiya News. Professor Scott Lucas, thank you.
Thank you.
In other news, a list of 34 names of Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza has been leaked, and it's being reported that they could be released in the first stage of a ceasefire agreement with Hamas. Well, earlier, the Israeli government denied receiving that list. They say that the names published were actually names that had been put on an older list that Israel had presented to mediators. Well, mediators, Qatar, Egypt and the United States have been trying for months to strike a deal to end the war between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Well, let's get more on all of this. We can speak to Gershon Baskin, former Israeli hostage negotiator who joins us from Jerusalem. Thank you for being with us once again here on Al Arabiya News. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, obviously has just 2 weeks left in the job. He says he's confident that a ceasefire deal in Gaza is going to come together. I mean, we've heard something along those lines before on more than one occasion. Is anything different this time around, would you say?
Yeah, I would say what's different this time from all the other times around is January 20th, the date when Donald Trump takes the White House once again. And that seems to be some kind of incentive, at least on the Israeli side, for making a deal come through. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is a big supporter of Trump, would like to hand Trump this victory on his first or second or early days in the White House, making good on Donald Trump's promise on election night that he would end wars. Oh, it's important to note, though, that the deal that's being negotiated right now is not a deal to end the war. It's a deal for a ceasefire and a partial return of the Israeli hostages.
Yeah, indeed. We're talking about a pause. And then there's, of course, the question, what happens after the pause is over?
Right. Which is why I would use this platform to call out to everyone involved, including those in Hamas, that there's an opportunity now to put a deal on the table that would end the war and release all the hostages, release a large number of Palestinian prisoners. And I believe very strongly that if Hamas knew how to exploit the moment, they could get a deal from the Israeli side that the Israelis have been reluctant to give, which is a deal to end the war, to withdraw from the Gaza Strip. And in return, Hamas would release all the 100 hostages they're holding. If Hamas was serious and wanted to end the war, it would submit that proposal in writing to the Qatari mediators right now, before the Israeli head of the Mossad leaves for Doha to be there for the concluding meeting.
Okay, and of course, it's estimated about 100 hostages left behind in Gaza. This leaked list contains the names of 34. I mean, what proof of life is there of any of them?
There's no proof of life of anyone except those who have been filmed in videos recently, including a young woman, and just a couple of nights ago. This list, by the way, was an Israeli list that was given to Hamas back in July. The Israelis published the list themselves in September. Somehow someone said that this was a list that Hamas agreed to. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that Hamas can agree to the list because, to the best of our knowledge, some of the names on the list are people who are already dead. And the Israelis were talking in the first stage of a deal about releasing only living hostages.
Indeed. And we've heard from Antony Blinken in the last day or so, suggesting there's been intensified engagement by Hamas on reaching a deal. I mean, what do you read into this notion of intensified engagement by Hamas? Is that a sign of desperation, do you think?
Well, I think Hamas is desperate to end the war, but Hamas will not surrender. So we have to put desperation perhaps in quotes and understand what it means. Hamas also understands, reading the global map, that there's an opportunity now because they understood that President Biden wouldn't put any real pressure on Israel. President Biden gave in to every single one of Israel's demands. And when the US president, put demands on Israel, even with a deadline for humanitarian aid to go into Gaza, that deadline passed without anything really changing. They're hoping that Donald Trump might be different, or that Israel's relationship with Donald Trump might be different, and therefore this might be an opportunity.
Indeed, and that will a lot boil down to the rapport that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump are believed to have. I mean, what do you make of the state of their relationship? And do you think Netanyahu's desire to bring about a ceasefire deal could be packaged up as being something of a welcome gift to the incoming Trump administration?
I think from Netanyahu's point of view, it would be a welcome gift to President Trump. We all know from past experience that President Trump is unpredictable, and he evaluates his relationship with other world leaders based on whether or not they're loyal to him. So we don't know. We heard Trump quite angry with Netanyahu after Biden won the presidency, and Netanyahu congratulated President Biden on that victory. And Trump at that point cursed Netanyahu and said some very nasty words about him. Apparently the relationship has been repaired, and Netanyahu is looking forward to a very close relationship with Donald Trump. But we know that he's transactional. And Donald Trump said on election night that he intends to end wars, not to start new ones. I've heard rumors that Donald Trump is interested in getting the Nobel Peace Prize. There's no question that if he helped to put an end to the war in Gaza and led the Israelis and the Palestinians into a genuine peace process, he would be deserving of that Peace Prize.
Well, we'll have to wait and see whether he's in the running at all for that. Just lastly, I mean, Hamas reported to have fired a number of rockets at Israel during the course of the last week. I mean, people will be surprised to hear they're still doing that so many months after this war begun, after nearly 46,000 people in Gaza have lost their lives. I mean, what is actually even left of Hamas at this stage?
Well, we don't really know. Hamas has been pretty badly decimated. Their control and command is not in place. They don't control all the territory, but they have been able to recruit new fighters. I would say that as long as the Israeli army remains in Gaza, Hamas will be able to survive and recruit new recruits. They control some of the humanitarian aid. Incoming phone call. They control some of the humanitarian aid, which allows them to also get revenues from it. And Hamas can engage in hot pursuit operations against Israeli soldiers, popping out of buildings or tunnels and being able to shoot RPGs or guns at Israeli soldiers. And as long as Israeli soldiers are there, Hamas will have targets and Hamas will remain with some degree of power.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. We're out of time, but really appreciate you speaking to us once again. Gershon Baskin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That is all we have time for today's edition of Global News Today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, goodbye.